The best advice I was given that helped me overcome my comparison trap was when you get caught comparing yourself to somebody else, the reality is they're probably on chapter 10 while you're still on chapter 1. So if you compare yourself to somebody else who's doing what you are wanting to do, the reality is they probably have just been doing it longer than you. That's it. They're on a different chapter. And when you get started, it is so easy to get caught in that trap. Well, I want to be doing what she's doing, and I want to do it now. Well, she's been doing it for 3 years. And so that's my advice I give people. Whenever you find yourself comparing, there's a really good chance they're on chapter 10 and you're on chapter 1. Just don't look at maybe look to them to model what they're doing, but don't compare, because they've been the only difference between you and what they're doing right now is time.
So who should you compare yourself to? Yourself from a month ago, yourself from a year ago? Like, what's a healthy comparison?
That's a great, you just nailed it on the head. I would tell you, I know this stuff is it can sound so cliche. The only person you should ever compare yourself is the person you were yesterday, right? I mean, the cliche statement is get 1% better every day. But that's true. Like, you should be comparing yourself every day. If you're better than who you were a month ago at a certain skill, you're progressing. Great. You're moving on to a new chapter. That's it. Just compete with the person you were yesterday and be a little better than you were yesterday. The example of failing from comparison is repeating the same chapter 1 over and over again for 10 years.
Well, I know people that are like that, yeah. And it seems like it's important to document your progress along the way, because how do you look back and see what you've done if you don't document, if you don't write it down? So is there like a journaling that you have clients do, daily, weekly, monthly, where they capture certain metrics that they're going to look back on later for comparison?
I don't have them journal metrics, but here's a question I do ask them to ask themselves. It's one I actually ask myself as well. I used to struggle with journaling because I would try it and then I would feel like I'm just checking the box. And so I started asking myself a question. Like, when I started the business, I said, okay, my first big milestone is going to be I hit $500,000. So I would ask myself the question every morning: how does a business owner of a $500,000 business operate today? And I would just write out that story. What does this guy do today if he were running a $500,000 business? And then it became, okay, I hit $500,000. What does a CEO of $1 million company do? And so I have them do the same thing. They have sales goals, right? So how does a producer who has a $500,000 sales goal this year operate today? And then they start writing down all the things that person would do. And that just becomes their playbook. And I'll tell you, as simple as that sounds, I've seen profound impacts in what it's done for me on how I do operate on a daily basis. And I know it's done the same thing for our clients, because now it forces them to think bigger every day.
Yeah, it's funny. Years ago, I thought, what does the CEO of Apple or Microsoft do? And I realized they can't do anything in the business. All they could do is really steer the ship. They don't have time to solder a circuit board or answer the phone or any of that stuff. So I thought to myself, the day I can systematize everything to the point where I'm completely redundant, I don't need to do anything, that'll be a success instead of myself to death.
Yep.
And being busy. I don't know if you incorporate any of that thinking. The people you coach, do they need to be busy? Like, do they crave it? Are they workaholics, or can they settle into a more relaxed pace where they're working 20 hours a week, yet things are so systematized that there's no fires anymore? They're okay.
That's a great question. I tell you, in our business, insurance, it's hard to, depending on how you set up your business, most don't have it set up to be where they can just show up 20 hours a week. Now, they're at a point in their career, they're a veteran, they have a book of business where they don't have to, manage that book very heavily. Okay, maybe they could back it off, right, and work a few hours. But what you said that I thought was really point was going back to that journal exercise. If you're asking yourself the question, how would a sales rep operate today with a $500,000 goal? You know what they're not writing down? She would sit in her inbox for 15 minutes answering emails. She wouldn't put that if she's operating to sell. And to your point, so many of our clients still get caught running in the business versus running the business, focusing on the business. And that's where we really try to come in, is help them take a step back and say, listen, yes, I know you're in the business every day, but you've got to take that step back and look down at the business to see what you're doing that is keeping you from growing. In the insurance industry, it was my challenge. You talk about hardships. You're doing too much of the doing. You are your own inhibitor to your own growth, because you're either too afraid to give up some money, some profit to hire somebody, And you have to make certain moves to remove yourself if you're going to grow. And that is typically the hardest conversation we have with an agency owner, especially when they're early on in their career, saying, listen, the only way this is going to grow is you got to start getting out of the way.